Murfreesboro and Rutherford County are so rich in their respective histories, with many women who've had integral roles in creating our community's sense of place. The Rutherford Arts Alliance is proud to partner with Murfreesboro City TV to showcase a number of these women as a part of our Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History project. From murals to our community-involved play, A Party of 12 by Mary Donay Johnson, we're proud to honor these diverse women of our past who inspire us as we give them a voice in today's world. Let's find out more about one of these leading ladies.
Betty Elrod was an influential community leader and actively promoted Murfreesboro and Rutherford County through local nonprofits and businesses. She was also a charter member of the Oaklands Association, whose mission was to restore Oaklands Mansion to be one of the most famous tourist attractions in the city. Elrod, along with her husband Cecil, owned the French Shop, a staple in local retail for many years. Their son, Cecil Elrod III, talks about his mother's legacy and contributions to our community.
Well, let's talk about your mother, Betty Elrod. She wasn't a native of Murfreesboro. She was born in Chattanooga.
Right.
How did she and your dad meet?
My father was in a state tennis tournament in Chattanooga. He was quite the tennis man of the day, and actually won the state tournament. But there was a party after the tournament, and they met at that party, and then that's where the romance started, I think. And so they started dating and courting then, and my father's sister, Elise Elrod, had married David Johnson in Chattanooga on Lookout. They lived on Lookout Mountain, so it gave Daddy a good excuse to go to Chattanooga often. So he would go back, and Drew Smith actually introduced him, and if you know who I'm talking about, she was quite a colorful character. But at that time, she was the society editor of the Chattanooga Times, and later became the political journalist that we knew her as in Nashville. So that's how the romance started, and the rest is history, I guess.
And Betty's maiden name was?
It's Garmany.
So they met in Chattanooga and started dating, and so tell us about when she came to Murfreesboro with him.
Well, they dated for a couple of years. I think that was like in 1938 that they met. And they dated, and she would come to Murfreesboro often and go to social things here. But my father was a national officer of the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And he, there again, he was quite a promoter. He wouldn't have had the radio station if he wasn't quite a promoter. But he was a promoter, and so he made my mother the official sponsor and hostess for the JCs, and so she had duties she had to perform in Murfreesboro, and they rigged all that just so they could be together, I'm sure, but it sounded good. So they did that, and then they married when the war. Let's see, I'm trying to remember. They married in January of 1941 in Chattanooga. Cordell Hull was Secretary of State, who was my grandmother's cousin. He was Secretary of State under Roosevelt, and he did this glamorous introduction to both Cuba and Jamaica for their honeymoon. So Town and Country followed them, and there were several celebrities that were involved in this little group of people that they were following at the time. But it was quite a trip. It was really a great trip. And back then, from what I've read, Cuba was the new Riviera, because people were just beginning to discover how pristine beaches and how wonderful it was.
And the Coco Cabana was still going on. I think we have a photograph of a group of them there.
Yeah, that was all still happening. And so they came back after a very long honeymoon. Bart Gordon tells a story and says that my grandfather offered my mother and father this glamorous honeymoon that Cordell Hull was setting up, or a house that he would build behind their house, and they took the honeymoon. So I don't know what that tells you about their business acumen at that time. They got here, and then soon after that, we entered the war. So see, they married in 41. I think Daddy left in 42, so Mom went back to Chattanooga and stayed with her parents while he was away. Then when he came back, it's when the radio station started.
I was going to ask you when you said radio station.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about WGNS.
Cecil Elrod's French shop was on the east side of the square, and my grandfather, Daddy did work a little bit for him, not much, but a little bit. He did a lot of interesting things. He had a semi-pro basketball team and had won the state championship in tennis, so he was getting well known. Anyway, he decided that his passion was radio and that that's what he wanted to do with his life. So while he was in the service, my grandfather started the motions of going through the Washington channels to get the frequency
License, yeah.
and the license. So when Mom and Dad came back to Murfreesboro, they had already started the wheels turning for the radio station, and Dad took the lead and brought Bill Pepper, who was with him. They were together in Brazil, and their mission in Brazil was to set up remote radio stations. So they had done that together. Bill, so when Dad came here, he brought Bill, told him about the radio station he was trying to put together. And Bill came on board as the first engineer or manager or something. They used to talk about it. People were so excited about it. And in fact, I have read this. Daddy was one of the first ones to sort of venture out with a rural, outside of a metropolitan area like Nashville. And WSM helped him design his studios here. They came here, and a real interesting tidbit, that's the only time that the Opry wasn't either at the Ryman or the New Opry House, was on Central High School's stage, because to help get WGNS going, WSM let the Opry have a remote
Oh, wow.
show. I don't think many people know that, but I think it's the only time that it was outside of the Ryman or Daddy had gone to Vanderbilt, and he had a lot of friends in Nashville and the Craig family and WSM. So, but the station did very well, and my mother was the first program director. She didn't really know what that meant or what she was going to have to do.
Did you get paid, I wonder?
Well,
in
I think
dresses?
She got paid in IOUs, I think, until they got it going. But she learned how to do that. She learned how to and it wasn't, she did it for a while, because it wasn't till a little while longer that they could afford to have the real staff that went along with the station. The studio, I think this is interesting for the Elrod Building here. They built a really, really nice, first-class type studio with the right acoustics so a lot of country music people in those early stages, I know Mother Maybelle Carter and the Carter family, June Carter, Cash, and they all recorded up there, right, here in Murfreesboro, which is kind of neat. But
now, up there, let's talk about where it was.
The building? Yeah.
In terms of today's world.
Today's world, and interestingly enough, the building was just named here in the last month, the Elrod Building. But it's across the square on the east side, which was the original Princess Theater. But as talkies came in and motion picture industry changed so rapidly, they needed a new theater pretty soon. That one didn't have a long life as a theater. Tony Sudicum from Nashville had built the building, I believe, and he built its twin building in Bowling Green, Kentucky. But it's a real ornate deco sort of building of the time. When my grandparents bought it after the theater moved and had its new pristine theater, when my grandparents bought it, my grandmother's vision was to capitalize on that deco look of the store and to make it not the store that they had come out of, which was Elrod Brothers. That was more general merchandise. They did sell ready-to-wear, but they sold piece goods and everything. She wanted to make a real specialty store, and it was her vision and her input that restored the building at the time, but they made it into a ready-to-wear, ladies' ready-to-wear business. They imported fixtures. They just really made it very, very nice. And it soon became a regional store, not just a store in Murfreesboro. They didn't develop the other 2 floors until Dad wanted to do the studio. Okay. So they built the WG&S studios on the 2nd floor. And then his sister had married David Johnson that I mentioned, and they had started Interstate Life and Accident Insurance Company in Chattanooga. This was the first Murfreesboro office for them too, so Pop built theirs, a rental office for them, which was more than an office. They had about 13 or 14 agents and a regional manager and that kind of thing. But I think it's interesting. It was another first in that building. It stayed there until my father sold the radio station. And my great uncle, built the building they're in now, Hubert Elrod. And there was a little bit of brother rivalry there, I think, for a bit when one brother took the other brother's tenant. But anyway, he built that building.
Now you mentioned that it's recently been named.
Yeah.
The building where your original was.
Yeah, it was just such an honor to the family. We don't own part of it now or have any direct interest, but it was for sale for a couple of years, and an attorney here in Murfreesboro bought it, and then they started the renovations of it. There were major renovations done several years ago, like 20 years ago, where it wasn't the wooden floors that I remember and all the things that, it's completely restructured. But anyway, this group bought the building, and they called me and said, would we mind if they named it the Elrod Building? And I said, well, no, we wouldn't mind. And feel very flattered that you would do that, because the Elrods really were in it 80 years, so with the different businesses, and so we did appreciate it. And they've just put the sign up here in the last few weeks.
And it's such a nice sense of place thing for a new owner and a newly renovated building to have a name of its history, so that people can say, well, why is it called the Elrod Building, for people that don't know, and now you're telling the story.
Well, it is interesting, and they were, 80 years is a long time, and the store stayed there after the radio station moved. Then we developed other businesses in it. My mother and sister started the college and career shop in the old studio space, and that was a very successful shop, sort of catering to MTSC, I think it was at the time.
So let's go back to Betty and your father, whichever Cecil he was, and we had them married and back from their honeymoon and establishing their businesses and radio stations. So let's talk more about what Betty was involved with, and
I think
memories you have.
Right. I think, I want to back up just for a minute. She went away to school in Washington, D.C., so I think my father engineered that too, so it was a good reason for him to go to Washington. She was supposed to go to Stevens, and he had no reason to go that direction, so he got my grandfather to send her to Gunston Hall instead, there again, so he could visit, I think. But the reason I'm adding that, she had learned and gotten to know a lot of political people through the Hull connection, through people in Virginia. She visited Virginia a lot, and so when she came to Murfreesboro, she had a good feel for what was going on in other places too, and I think that helped her a lot. And she realized that the platform of the radio station, as well as the store, she could help them, and she could help the community, because they could do interviews and things. They had a Saturday morning coffee program where they would get different people from the square merchants or civic leaders to come and talk on the radio, and had things like that she helped get started. But I think she had a very sincere desire to bring what knowledge she had gained at that point into Murfreesboro, and she wanted to do that through the organizations. She was president of a number of different civic clubs, but she was more about helping. Like I think there was 8,000. Is what I remember that figure when she moved here. She
Population.
said population. She said that when she was buying her trousseau, the man that owned the store, Mr. Pickett, said, "Well, what are you going to do in Murfreesboro?" And she said, "Oh, it's a wonderful place." And he said, "Well, I guess you can go and watch the train come by." Didn't give us much credit at that point, but she wanted to help cultivate those different kinds of organizations, like you women have done it in subsequent generations. You know, it's wonderful when you look back and you realize a little town of 8,000, and there were always some leaders and some movers and shakers that helped bring in new things to the community. And I think, you know, the hospital was just being built at that time. We didn't have a hospital.
And this was Rutherford Hospital,
Rutherford
our
Hospital.
first hospital.
Yeah,
So that's another way we were growing in terms of our medical community.
right. Now, my grandmother, she might have been the first president of the hospital auxiliary. I'm not sure. I know she was president, but I'm not sure if she was the first. I found some letters when they were forming the hospital, or trying to get the hospital built and the direction they were going at that time. The old doctors were Dr. White, Dr. Black. That's funny. Dr. White and Dr. Black.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
Dr. Campbell was here, Dr. Scott. But they were and so I found these letters where my grandmother was communicating with these men about how they might put the hospital board together. And I think that's why she got so involved from the women's angle with the auxiliary.
As part of a promotional campaign to make Murfreesboro the dairy capital, Betty and Cecil Elrod traveled to Cuba to present a local dairy cow to then-President Fulgencio Batista. As the story unfolded, things did not go as planned.
A group of people were trying to promote Middle Tennessee and Rutherford County particularly as the dairy capital of the South. And my father, having the radio station, was a part of that and trying to come up with ways that they could promote that. And he, as I said earlier, he was a promoter, so he decided to get Senator Kefauver involved, and I think Senator Gore was the junior senator at the time, and there was all this stuff. We're going to make Rutherford County the dairy capital of the South.
And he had the radio station to publicize it.
To publicize it, and he did that free of charge. He just was trying to build that up. I do remember a conversation that my grandfather used to talk about that Senator Kefauver said to my grandfather, he said, "Tell Cecil to tone it down just a little bit. These senators from Wisconsin are getting real mad at me. They want to protect their cheese."
Yes.
So it got to be a little bit of a thing.
Well,
in
growing in statues, what
That's
that
right.
was, yes.
Yeah. But I thought that was kind of fun. But so anyway, they devised a Dairy Princess contest, and they had contestants and pageants in each small town, and then the reigning princess was going to, Daddy came up with this, she was going to present a dairy cow to, and I can't think of, Batista, that's who it was, his son, or no, to him.
Before
he was the
Castro.
president before Castro, before the communism. So the idea was that they would send the dairy princess over with this dairy cow to Cuba, because Daddy had fallen in love with Cuba when they went on their honeymoon, and he thought he could do all this promotion. But they needed more than just sending the princess and the cow. They sent my mother too to arrange everything. They met in Miami, and Ann Wolfe was the dairy princess. She was a beautiful girl, and my mother was the chaperone and trying to coordinate everything. And
The queen.
the queen, I think.
Betty was the queen.
She might have been the queen. But they boarded this small plane that had a freight cargo section in it to go to Cuba, and they landed, and there was a parade, and the women had gotten all primped up in the airplane, and they were ready to make this grand entrance in Cuba, and they opened the cargo door, and the cow was dead.
Oh my goodness.
Not so good for Rutherford County's dairy industry at that point. My mother had the good sense to say, close the door quickly. We don't want anybody to see the cow.
There with her.
And she didn't really know what to do. And of course, the princess looked like a princess, and they had the parade. And I think she got with the American consul or something, and she said, well, I'm supposed to be giving this gift to the president. What am I going to give him? I don't have a cow anymore. And they all put their heads together. Well, there was a circus in Cuba. Ringling Brothers was having a circus. So somehow or other she got an elephant, and she presented the elephant to the president from Rutherford County. So it just really turned into a crazy story, but he appreciated it. He was glad he had an elephant in Cuba, I guess. I remember Bart Gordon telling me, saying, most people would have gotten real upset about that, but Miss Elrod didn't. She just figured out another way to do something that would be written about and talked about, and it was. They was in all the papers that this elephant was presented to the son of Batista. So it's a good story.
Looking to improve roadways leaving the city, both of the Elrods played roles in paving a better pathway to Lebanon.
They were trying to build the road. They just had a country road to Lebanon from Murfreesboro. And my father said, we've got to get the highway people in Nashville to fund this road to get a better thoroughfare between Lebanon and Murfreesboro.
And by country road, you mean like a dirt road?
Dirt road, just a bad road.
Okay.
It wasn't good at all. And this was in, I think, the early 40s. So they started this promotion to do 231 to continue it and pave it. And so if you remember, our house was right on the corner of Main Street and Tennessee Boulevard, and that leads into 231. So my father told my mother that he was going to invite these people from Nashville to come out and see how bad it was. I don't know if it was really just dirt. It might have been some sort of gravel road. And that they needed to do something. I mean, Middle Tennessee deserved to have a better road connecting Lebanon and Murfreesboro. So he said, I'm going to bring them, and I'm going to bring them to the house first, and you entertain them until I get the rest of the group from Murfreesboro together, and we'll drive out toward the Lebanon road. And so she did. She had whatever she served at the time and entertained these people. My father didn't get there, and he didn't get there. And finally, she said, well, we can go without him if he doesn't show up here pretty soon. He did come. He did arrive. What happened was Mr. Jack McFarland, who was the publisher of the newspaper, had some sort of delay. Anyway, they take off, and they go and they assess the road, and they agreed. It was terrible. These are the state executives. Mm-hmm. And came back to our house, and they said, well, we're going to have to bring a few more engineers, a few other people. Ms. Elrod, can we be here next Friday at your house? She said, well, I guess you can. That's fine. We'll go look at she got this nickname as they were trying to develop this road as Miss Rockpile of 1943. She was trying to get the road paved, but it was an integral part of just connecting all the dots in Middle Tennessee.
From nonprofits to local businesses, Betty Elrod greatly contributed to the growth of our community in the mid-20th century and is another shining example of a leading lady.
You know a good bit about the Leading Ladies Project and several of the women, her contemporaries and so forth. How does it make you feel that we are trying to give voice to these women or bring them into today's world, and what lessons we can learn from them?
Well, I think it's wonderful. And I'll tell you why I really think it's wonderful. What you all have done and what I've followed, we've got women from different decades and centuries, and that's all good, and of different backgrounds, and they make the whole fiber of the community work. But what I like about what you're doing with this more contemporary group, and that more contemporary, I mean the last, from say the 1930s to 2000, we all knew, you knew my mother, we all knew these people, and we can relate a good story. We can tell the story firsthand right now. And it's good for the people when you think of the population. When Mr. Pickett told her to go down and wave to the train, because there were only 8,000 people in the whole county, I think, at that time, or at least in the city, to that level of population, and the way it grew, and it grew very fast, because one of the things that I think the fathers of the city were trying to do was bring quality industry in, which changed us from the whole agrarian background that we had. So all of that was evolving at once, and these strong women that could lead the civic clubs and the things that went along with that growth, I think it's a tremendous asset for people now to know that, and we're still around that we can talk about it. So it's a good thing.
Well, and I think you've done a good job of sharing with us your admiration for the men in business in your family, but the fact that the women were also very active roles in the community and in the family businesses.
And they were very active. It goes back, my grandmother, I think that was in 1920 to be doing what she was doing was really sort of, when was suffrage? When did women?
That was in 1920.
20. Well, that was about that same time. And here she was incorporating a business in 1925. So that's kind of neat to think about. And then I think in my mother's case, she took the lead from her mother-in-law. I mean, her mother-in-law was very active, but my mother saw an opportunity. We built our first country club, and she was the first social chairman. We did so many things that were going on in the community at the time that she brought the Nashville Ballet here for a ballet recital back in the 50s. And they did a lot of things that broadened the minds of the people in the community, and they liked it.
And the quality of life.
And the quality of life, that's right. When you think of the core things that we've had with the educational institutions, Soule College and Union University and Tennessee College for Women, and then of course MTSU now, that's not many communities can claim that sort of thing.
That's true.
And I think that's a wonderful part of all this. So
a huge amount of cultural assets that we don't really appreciate or market enough probably for our community. For more information about our project, Leading Ladies of Rutherford County History, visit our website, leadingladiesrutherford.com. Or if you have a story of someone from the past who inspired you, you can share it on our website. For more information about the Rutherford Arts Alliance and what we're doing to promote arts, culture, and heritage, visit rutherfordartsalliance.org. And thank you for watching.